There we go. Second Avenue.
Good evening. Welcome to the December 5th, 2023 City of Minot Planning Commission meeting. Can we call it a roll?
Bauman,
Yes.
Gomes,
Yes.
Bacon, Gates, Buchalter,
Yes.
Iverson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Leiter, Longton, Minot,
Yes.
Nesdall, Offerdahl,
Yes.
Neela. You have a quorum.
All right. With that, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on. I'm looking for approval for the November 7th, 2023 regular meeting minutes.
I'll move to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Kibler,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Holcalter. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Gomes,
Yes.
Buchalter,
Yes.
Iverson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Minot,
Yes.
Offerdahl.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 5. This is a continued public hearing for conditional use permit for Seeds of Eden. Public hearing request by Isaiah Keller representing Lars Wikstrom on behalf of CXL LLC. Owner for a conditional use permit for a group home for up to 12 residents plus staff. The legal description for the property is Lot 1, Blaisdell subdivision, Block 13, Ramstead Riverview subdivision to the city of Minot. With that, we'll turn it over to staff for findings and report.
All right, the subject property is located in central Minot, just south of the downtown area, just to the east of the old Trinity Hospital site. Its current zoning designation is R3B. This is our current RM zoning district. Group homes are permitted by right in the R3B district for up to 6 residents. The conditional use permit is required for 7 to 12 residents. The future land use map in our comprehensive plan designates this area as suburban residential. These are the site photos that were provided at the last meeting. I also went out and got some more. The picture on the left is showing the parking lot across the road that was referred to at the last meeting, as well as the parking in the rear of the building. So just to kind of summarize the evaluative criteria, since we did cover this in the last meeting, the issues that were brought up by staff were revolved around the parking availability and the current parking plan, which would provide parking at the city parking ramp 900 feet from the actual building itself. There were 3 evaluative criteria that we felt were not met by the current application for conditional use. So, finding of fact, this can be found in the staff's written report, just so that we clarify the evaluative criteria 1 and 5 through 8 were met, satisfied, as far as staff felt. It was 2 through 4 that were the issue. The Planning Commission does have the authority to hear the case and decide whether to approve, deny, or approve with conditions. public notice requirements have all been met. So the recommendation still stands at staff recommending denial. However, there is that alternative recommendation. So at this time, we are recommending that it be tabled again until the February 6th, 2024 meeting at 5:30 here in the City Council chambers.
Thank you. Any questions for city staff from the commissioners? Okay, seeing no questions from the commissioners, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing or continue the public hearing. Is there anybody in attendance that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Feel free to come up, sir. Please sign your name and address or affiliation there on the podium, and then introduce yourself if possible so we can address you.
Good evening, council members. I just wanted to briefly update. So when we had met last, kind of the status was going to try to reach out to Trinity and see if they'd be willing to rent some of their parking spaces. I was able to get a hold of Allison Fry, Associate Director of Corporate Relations, and so they had to talk about it at a committee hearing. And so today I did receive some direction. I had forwarded the email on to the council here, but basically what they're willing to do, and this is in email format, so we'll have to get a lease agreement and that type of thing, but they're willing to lease us 5 parking spots for $20 each per month. So pretty reasonable, and maybe more or less a month by month lease. And that would be in the event that maybe something major would take place where they'd need that parking for some reason. But across from the property, which we had seen in the picture, there's a pretty substantial area. It's kind of the overflow from when the hospital is operating on the south side, which is right across the street from us. So in the next few weeks, hopefully sooner rather than later, I'll be working on a lease agreement, and hopefully that will satisfy the city's concerns about people parking where they shouldn't. So that's all that I have. Open to questions if he has any.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and sir, they're willing to lease 5 spots, and you need more than that. But what are they doing with all those other spots that they cannot lease to you? I'm just curious because it seems like a ghost parking lot.
Yep. So practically, most individuals there don't have a license typically. So they get licenses and they get vehicles. And so, I mean, I think 5 plus the 2 that we have in the alley on that will be pretty substantial. Probably more than enough most instances. And in the event that things are going really well, which is what we hope, and say there's more people that can drive that are living there, we would just limit it to 7 that have the privileges, and as they stay and continue to progress in their phases, then they can earn that spot. And usually, I mean, it wouldn't take long. Most people are transitioning out and getting their own independent space and stuff like that. So, but yeah, there's a lot of parking. I agree. So,
As I recall, you were part of the charge you have is to help these people get licenses.
Sure.
Too. So
yeah.
you anticipate
maybe
getting
they'd
people
be
licenses
open.
and bringing cars in? Is that how it works?
So that one of the areas of their goals or one of the areas of their care plan is to be responsible and to obtain employment. So it's not really something where we say, well, you need a license to live here. It's not really anything like that. It's more or less the privilege and the convenience of a license and that empowering them throughout their life and career. So we encourage them getting their licenses. And so if they can get it and if they're able to manage that, and that means all the paperwork's in order, then it's great. It kind of takes a lot of the burden off of other support, other staff needing to accommodate for transportation, or even sometimes the public transportation system is not always perfect either. So there's a lot of barriers with that. But 7 would give us a lot of moving space.
If I may ask, how many of those 7 spots then would be dedicated for staff?
So those 7 would be strictly for the residents. And then we kind of designated one right in front for staff on the street, which is literally right outside. We just didn't want to take up more spots south or north and bother neighbors. Or so there's a residential home to the south, and then to the north, the Providence House, and they'll have a busy parking lot and system as well. So we just want to be mindful of that. But yeah, we should only need one, and then there is a spot in the garage, so staff could park in the garage too. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Did you get a sense in your conversations with Trinity, did they seem amenable to the idea of having up to 9 parking spaces leased or rented, or was 5 kind of the limit of what they were willing and able to engage in?
It's a good question. My hope is to meet with them in person soon, and maybe we can get a little more understanding. I requested 3, trying to be conservative with it. They kind of exceeded and said 5, so that was encouraging. I imagine they'd be open to more, I would hope, but I'll have to get kind of an audience in person and just kind of see where they're at with that. And maybe there's some other things we're not seeing that they've got plans for, but we'll certainly use them if they let us. So,
And a quick follow-up question on that with Trinity too. So you said this is a month-to-month lease?
that's what they had mentioned to me, as a month-to-month.
Is there any
lease.
long-term lease? I mean, you get 4 months and they kick you out, and then do we have a plan B for this additional parking?
So
or
the,
this
the,
conditional
the
use
plan,
permit?
the plan B that I had, if Trinity were to say no, was we just limit the amount of residents that can have a car on property. Doesn't mean they can't get their license, doesn't mean they can't get their SR22 and a lot of those things that are needed, but they just wouldn't be able to have a car on property. So the privileges would be limited from, say, in this scenario, 7 to probably 2. So from my experience, if there's 2 or 3 in a house of 10 or 11 that have their licenses and are driving, that's decent. It's not bad, and it's not uncommon. So, but of course we want to encourage them, maximize their potential and ability to drive and that type of thing. So,
Is that something that you'd maybe talk with Trinity on getting like a year lease instead of a month to
Sure.
month or something?
yeah,
Or-
and that was my hope. I just had received the email today, so it's very, very new, very fresh. But yeah, we want to lock in some long-term stability with that. So.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll call you back up if you've got anything. Thank you, sir. Anybody else in attendance wish to speak on behalf of this project or this agenda item? I'm sorry. Okay, anybody in the audience that wishes to speak in opposition of this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Want to turn it over to staff?
Chairman Offerdahl, you'd want to keep it open.
Oh, yeah,
If,
you're right.
If the planning commission decides that they would like to continue it to February as recommended by staff, so.
My apologies. We will keep the public hearing open for that, and then we'll turn it over to staff or to commissioners for a motion.
I'll go ahead and move to table the agenda item to, you said February is,
It would be February 6th, 2024 at 5:30 here in the City Council chambers.
all right, so table until February 6th, 2024 at 5:30 here in the council chambers for further consideration.
I'd second.
Okay, so we got a motion to table by Vice Chair Bauman and a second by Commissioner Kibler. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Gomes,
Yes.
Buchalter,
Yes.
Iverson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Minot,
Yes.
and Offerdahl.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6, annexation and conditional use permit, dawn to dusk. Public hearing request by Rustin, representing Jace Properties LLC, owner for annexation of this into this corporate limits of the city of Minot, and for a conditional use permit for bulk storage of propane and associated materials. The legal description for the property is Lot 1, dawn to dusk addition to the city of Minot, North Dakota. With that, we'll turn it over to staff for findings and report.
All right, Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission. This property is located the far eastern part of Minot. It is actually directly adjacent to the Minot corporate limits. It is just north of Highway 2, out near, kind of give you reference, it'd be just south of the county highway department building. It is currently zoned M2. On the future land use map, this property is designated for gateway commercial. Site plan or site photos, it looks about like an open field looks. It is just south of one of the city of Minot's water towers. Finding of fact, the applicant has submitted a complete application. Property is currently zoned M1 light industrial, designated gateway commercial in our 2040 comprehensive plan. The proposed development meets the standards subject to the conditions for hazardous materials storage in an M1 light industrial district. This is outlined in staff written report. The proposed development meets standards subject to conditions for warehousing open in M1 light industrial district as outlined in the staff analysis of our written report. The Planning Commission has the authority to hear the case and decide whether it should approve, deny, or with or without conditions. Public noticing requirements have been met. Staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt the staff finding of fact and recommend approval of the conditional use permit for hazardous materials storage and open warehousing with the following conditions. Hazardous materials storage areas shall strictly comply with the quantities, materials, and location as presented in the site plan and is attached as part of this permit. Hazardous material storage areas shall strictly comply with the quantities, materials, and location as presented in the letter of intent. Warehousing in open warehousing area shall strictly comply with the location and as presented in the site plan. All outdoor storage area will be screened in compliance with our land use ordinance. Any future expansion to the scope of the project beyond what is outlined in the submitted site plan, including construction or additional storage capacity for bulk hazardous material, will require an amendment to this conditional use permit. Hazardous materials are limited to those reviewed and approved by the fire chief, and the developer will work with the city engineer or their designee to have an address assigned to the property during the building permit application stage. driveway placement, stormwater, and final site plan will be required. Sewer connection fees are required as well. For that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner or Vice Chair Bauman?
Thanks so much for that. I appreciate the presentation. Anytime that we start to annex land into city requirements or obligation, I just want to make sure, do we have any infrastructure obligation or costs that are associated as a community with annexing this property?
None were brought up by engineering. Chairman Offerdahl, Vice Chairman Bauman. I'll defer to Emily.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Putting you in the hot seat right away.
Chairman, Commissioners, in this area, I believe the utilities that they would be requiring are already in place.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Dietrich. One of these slides noted that the materials of the propane needs to be stored according to the conditions for M1 or M2, the zoning. What are the conditions that pertain to the particular zoning? What's required to store propane in an M1 or M2 district? I forget which it was.
Yeah. Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler. So what that relates to is, so there's going to be some 10 to 20,000 tanks, multiple 10 to 20,000 tanks, and that would be the hazardous material storage. The second component of this is a conditional use permit for open warehousing. So these are where they store personally used, residential use size tanks that will be stored out in the open. They'll be effectively empty, but they'll be housed in the open. And so some of the requirements are basic screening when you're piling things outside, out in the open. They need to be stored on gravel as opposed to just out in the grass, right? So some of these basic aesthetic and obscuration requirements are part of the open warehousing conditional use permit. So that's what it's referring to.
And when a fire chief signs off on the storage of this material, it's because they've got the equipment to deal with whatever the flash point is of the material, and their criteria is met when they sign off. And they set that criteria?
Correct. So the rural fire reviewed it as well as our fire department, because ultimately it will be annexed. So long as they're aware of what they're responding to, they'll know what to bring and respond appropriately. And they did not have any concerns with regard to the proposal for propane storage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for city staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anybody in attendance that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item?
Good evening. My name is Donna Bai. I am here as a substitute employee for Houston Engineering and a representative for the Schatz family, and I'm here to answer any additional questions that may come up. Can't say that I'll have all the answers, but I am here
We
for
got
that
any
reason.
questions for Ms. Bai? Okay, we'll call you up if we got anything. Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Anybody wish to speak in opposition of this agenda item? Okay, anybody wish to speak for or against? No? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll turn it over to the commissioners for a motion.
I guess I would move to approve based on staff finding of facts, including the conditions.
Second.
Okay, motion to approve by Commissioner Kibler, second by Commissioner Longton. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, call the roll.
Bauman?
Yes.
Domes?
Yes.
Burkhalter?
Yes.
Iverson?
Yes.
Kibler?
Yes.
Longton?
Yes.
Minot?
Yes.
And Offerdahl.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 7. Major subdivision preliminary plat, Rose Hill Cemetery. Public hearing request by Mr. Bryan here, representing the city of Minot, property owner for the preliminary plat to consolidate several properties into 2 lots. The proposed subdivision is to be named Rose Hill Cemetery 4th Edition, being a replat of Outlot 18 Rose Hill Cemetery, St. Leo Cemetery, and St. Anthony Hill Edition, located in the northwest and northeast quarters of the Section 25 Township 155 North, Range 83 west of the 5th Principal Meridian to the City of Minot, County of Ward, State of North Dakota. With that, we'll turn it over to staff for findings and report.
Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission. The subject property is located very central in Minot. This is the softball fields that have just east and north of the softball fields where the new complex with the turf fields was completed this last summer. It includes both the city-owned section of ball fields on the east side all the way north through the entirety of the cemetery property. Here's a copy of page 1 of the preliminary plat. This is primarily the cemetery section on the north side. Here is page 2 of the preliminary plat. This is primarily the ball fields and the community gardens on the southeast side of the property. The entirety of the property is currently zoned P, public. It is designated for parks and recreation in our future land use map. I just wanted to draw attention to one other thing, is it'll be brought up in the conditions later on. The commission should consider the addition of an easement for a landlocked property that is owned by the city. It is highlighted on the screen here. That will come again in our recommendations for conditions for going up further. Some site photos. This is the south side looking north towards the ball fields. This is the city lot that is accessed from the cemetery, currently without any access easement. We have the multi-use trail and tree row that separates the uses between the ball field and the cemetery property. And then a picture of the cemetery facing southeast. Finding of fact, this is all outlined in the staff's written report. The Planning Commission has the authority to recommend approval with or without conditions, or recommend denial of the major subdivision preliminary plat. Public hearing notices requirements were met. Staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt staff finding of fact and recommend the City Council approve the major subdivision preliminary plat for Rose Hill Cemetery subdivision with the conditions that the sidewalks required by our land development ordinance be included. This would be adjacent to the cemetery property as soon as feasibly possible, and that an addition of an easement providing access to that landlocked city-owned parcel, providing access in perpetuity. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Excuse me. Any questions for city staff?
Mr. Chairman, just one passing question. Are you saying that the Parks and the Rose Hill is platted under Parks and Recreation?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, yes, the cemetery is, it's identified in our future land use plan as Parks and Recreation. That's
Can you tell me what that means?
For open space.
Like digging up the bodies, making more baseball fields, or what is that?
I would, likely it would be the other way around, that the ball fields would be removed for additional cemetery space.
Okay.
I believe that the city is allowing the ball fields as a use until the space is needed for the publicly owned cemetery.
Okay, thank you. Good to know.
Any other questions for city staff? All right, I'm
Sorry,
sorry,
I was
Vice Chair
silent.
Bauman, that's all right?
The installation of sidewalks on the north and south side of the parcels. Can you just talk me through a little bit what that's going to look like real life?
Chairman Offerdahl, Vice Chair Bauman. In our land development ordinance, developers that are platting new subdivisions are required to install sidewalks. And as the city is the developer, we are required within 5 years to install sidewalks unless it is released from that obligation by the engineering department. Now, that would be the west side of the cemetery. There is not enough space for sidewalks, so that's been excluded. But the north side, to complete connectivity with the adjacent neighborhood sidewalk, would be required for us to complete. And then on the south side, there's already an existing multi-use trail, and there's also other sidewalk projects going on in the adjacent subdivisions. So it would just be a matter of completing the connectivity on the southern side of that park property to allow for pedestrian access from all directions.
Great. I appreciate that. And so I don't know if we can go back a few slides to look at just the map. That would be essentially our 11th Avenue, southeast, there we go. And then probably 16th Avenue Southeast, is that correct? Would be where those parking lot or those
It would
sidewalks
be
would be.
11th Avenue Southeast on the north side of the cemetery property, completing connectivity all the way over to the 3rd Street Southeast area over there. And then it would be along 16th, creating complete connectivity from the subdivisions on the east to the sidewalks in the neighborhoods on the west. A good portion of that has a paved multi-use trail. So likely it would be a continuation of that type of, so it wouldn't be sidewalks per se, but it would be pedestrian access.
Awesome. Thank you for the clarification on that. I appreciate it.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, this easement does not need to be paved. It's just access.
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, our recommendation would be to place an easement over top of an existing paved road.
Oh, okay.
There's several roads that already go both. My recommendation would be to go straight north out of the property because that's the straightest direction out.
Okay,
Unless
thank
we
you.
really want to pay the surveyor to survey that curvy road to the west. Just laying an easement over an existing roadway that would just provide access to that lot if it were to ever transfer ownership.
Thank you. Any other questions for city staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing here. Anybody in attendance wish to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Anybody wish to speak in opposition to this agenda item? Anybody wish to speak for or against this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll turn it over to commissioners for a motion.
I guess I'd move to approve based on staff findings and facts and with all the right sidewalks and easements.
Motion to,
I'll second.
okay, motion to approve by Commissioner Kibler and second by Commissioner Menham. Any discussion? Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Domes,
Yes.
Buchalter,
Yes.
Iverson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Minham,
Yes.
and Offerdahl.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 8, other business. I believe we have a few items for other business tonight.
Start with Tim.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a couple for you, Commissioner Offerdahl, if I can. The first one is actually going to be just a thought that crossed my brain, and this is more for staff. Thinking we're kind of at the 6-month mark of our comprehensive plan being approved, and in April or May, we're going to be at the 1-year mark of having approved that document for our community. I was curious if it is possible to just request that maybe in April or May, you're able to present to the Planning Commission and thus the public kind of an update on successes, progress on several of our key goals as identified in the comprehensive plan. It'd be great to hear what we're doing. I know we've checked a lot of boxes already. It's been fun to see, but I also know that I was pretty involved in the making of that, and it's always just great to get an update and then to keep us all, I think, as a planning commission, pretty rooted in that document as well. So that's just a request. Do you need a formal motion or anything like
That's
that?
okay.
Okay.
We can do that.
Sounds good. So the second thing that I'd love to bring up, which is a little bit bigger, and it's a topic that's been on my mind quite a bit for the last month or two, is around the topic of parking requirements and minimum parking requirements. So the concept is that when a developer or when a project is being rebuilt or redesigned, we as a city have guidelines for if you're building a building this big or it's being used in this type, you have to have this many parking spaces, which I was involved in the zoning ordinance steering committee at the time that it was approved and re-involved, and I felt like what we did at the time was correct. However, we're getting a wealth of knowledge from other communities across America, both East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, South, of communities our size and smaller that have worked on repealing or reducing parking minimums, required parking minimums. And I think that now might be a really good time to engage as a community in that conversation and just see if there's a way that we can kind of reduce some regulations on developers, whether it's apartment developers or retail developers, some ways to kind of give creativity and power back to them and allow them to find some great solutions, which would also hopefully spur some development or even redevelopment within areas that are pretty overparked right now. Parking minimums really came into existence in the 1950s when everyone was getting a car, and the idea of you had to have a parking space for every person. Things have since kind of changed, especially with the pandemic, as online ordering and curbside pickup has evolved, and it just kind of feels like it's maybe not the best fit of what it could be. And again, I acknowledge I was on the zoning ordinance steering committee when we approved the reduction in parking requirements, and so I realized this is kind of an evolution for me too of understanding how maybe we could do this better. So. With that, I'd like to formally make a motion that the Planning Commission, along with Planning Department staff, engage in a conversation over the next year about further reduction or elimination of parking requirement minimums across the city of Minot, with the goal of presenting any zoning ordinance text amendments, if deemed necessary, to the City Council by December 1st of 24. So again, with that motion, the goal is to kind of have a year-long conversation. There's a lot of case studies that exist of, again, communities our size, our region, and smaller and in different parts that I think are great food for thought. And I'd love to go on kind of an educational journey with everyone, if that's okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if just sort of, and I would second it, but with the sort of caveat that I think that we should have the conversation, not like research and then a big bulk of research delivered to us to make a decision, but maybe we have incremental moments where we talk about what these guys have found out concerning parking, what's going on around the nation, what's the trend, et cetera. So I would second the motion with the hope that we have a conversation rather than a big bulk of information given to us about which we make an instant decision. That's a long second.
Okay, any further discussion? Yep.
Chairman Offerdahl, if I might just propose just a minor amendment. You said December 1st. That's a Sunday. The first meeting would likely be December 2nd. So maybe just refer to it generically as the first meeting, City Council in December. And then depending on how holidays fall, if they do delay one, it'll be accurate.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm amenable to that.
I accept the amendment to what my second.
You and your fancy 2024 calendar over there. Any other discussion? So the one question I have is you discussed that you had dealt with this on the zoning ordinance committee. Is that committee no longer?
My understanding is it's paused right now.
Right.
I'm kind of waiting for maybe something to bring it back to the table, and I'll let Mr. Billingsley, he's the chairperson of that, kind of talk about
Yeah,
it.
Mr. Chairman, typically the zoning ordinance steering committee hears these kind of requests first before they come to the planning commission. So I'm not opposed to studying this but I still think we need to involve the zoning ordinance steering committee before we really bring anything to the planning commission for adoption. So
Do you, I guess as the person that made the motion, do you feel like it would be more appropriate to maybe change this to asking the zoning ordinance steering committee to come up with recommendations to then bring back to us to consider, change, and discuss, and then pass along to the city council if we deem necessary?
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Bauman, our land development ordinance specifically states that these kind of amendments need to go there first. So I would recommend that.
Chairman Offerdahl, if I could just present a correction there. So no, the land development ordinance does not refer to the zoning ordinance steering committee at all anymore. That was removed. The zoning ordinance steering committee's sole purpose is to evaluate significant adjustments to the zoning ordinance steering committee, generally article level or above. So a full rewrite, that is where it'd be appropriate. Per our code, who may submit applications, any member of the public, the planning division, upon recommendation by the Planning Commission, that's one way. At the direction of City Council is another way, or by its own initiative, meaning the Planning Division can submit its own application to itself to fulfill best practice or to fulfill the comprehensive plan. And so in this case, I do think it is appropriate for the Planning Commission to direct staff to begin the research effort, conduct it, and present information to the Planning Commission as is being proposed by Vice Chair. So my recommendation is to follow the land development ordinance and honor that the Planning Commission does have the authority to direct staff to perform work and gather information, present it. And then if the zoning ordinance steering committee does need to be included in the process, that's fine. But ultimately, Planning Commission provides a recommendation to City Council. So,
Thank you for that clarification. So, any further questions? Okay, any further discussion? So currently, we do have a motion on the table and a second. And I believe that kind of falls in line with what Principal Planner Van Dyke had mentioned. So with that, we can call that to roll.
Okay. Bauman,
Yes.
Domes,
Yes.
Hochhalter,
Yes.
Iverson. Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Minot,
Yes.
Offerdahl.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Any other business?
Yeah, I have a couple of items. For starters, Mr. Van Dyke changed our reappointments for planning commissioners a couple of years ago. And at the end of every year, 2 commissioners' terms expire. Commissioner Hochhalter has decided not to seek a reappointment. He just notified us of that just recently. I want to thank you for your service to the commission for the past 5 years, Justin. Then I also would like to thank Chairman Offerdahl for agreeing to serve another term on the commission. His name will be presented at City Council at the next meeting. I also would like to thank and acknowledge John Van Dyke for the work that he's done for the department over the past 3 years. As many of you know, he's going to the private sector to work as a consultant. And John was very much involved with many projects in our department. He joined us at the tail end of the land development ordinance update, but he was very instrumental with the subdivision code rewrite. And he helped entangle a couple of really messed up subdivisions that are now active. We're issuing building permits, and he needs to be acknowledged for that work that he's done. He's also implemented several things within our department, such as career ladders for planners, and he's really helped move the needle in our department in a really positive direction for the past 3 years. So I have a plaque here for John that I hope he will accept, that acknowledges and thanks him for the 3 years of outstanding contributions he made to the city of Minot. And we really thank you for the work that you've done for us, John.
thanks, Brian.
have one more announcement. We do not have a January meeting. There's no cases on the agenda, so our next meeting will be in February.
Okay, with that, I just also would like to say thank you, Commissioner Holkalter, for everything that you've done. Appreciate it. It's a lot of volunteer time. And you've been a part of that. I think we've kind of been here the same amount of time, so I appreciate all the efforts and support that you've done there. And Principal Planner Van Dyke, it's been a pleasure. You brought a breath of fresh air to this dais here when we were kind of in a transition period, so I appreciate everything you did and you've done. And your wealth of knowledge is always appreciated. I'm going to miss our talks, but maybe we can talk and have coffee some other time. So thank you very much for all that you've done as well. So, anything else?
Yeah. So one last thing under other business, and thank you all too. I want to say that you guys are wonderful to work with, and it's been really interesting to see the shifts and see the different dynamic. And Commissioner Kibler, you just keep asking those questions. But everybody, I just want to say thank you. So one last thing to throw over to Jonathan Rosenthal. He's our Economic Development Administrator. And he wanted to, one of the things that he passed out was a downtown placemaking report. That's not what he's going to be discussing tonight, but that was just for your own edification. But also he wanted to talk a bit about, well, I'll let him discuss and use his specific verbiage. So.
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, this is kind of a last minute thing. I say last minute. John's leaving on Friday. It turns out I'm leaving on Thursday, at least. I will be accompanying my wife to the hospital on Friday, and we'll see how things go from there. So, speaking of planning, I think it was Mike Tyson said, everybody goes into a fight with a plan until you get hit in the face. And I'm afraid that's what's happened. This wasn't my plan. From the date of this, you can see back in July, I've been kind of thinking about this for quite a while. And John and I have had a chance to discuss it a little bit, but we kind of put it on pause, and then things changed. And I didn't want to go out without saying that this is something worthy of consideration. So I might have refined this a little bit more if John and I had been able to kind of schedule a little more discussion. But I still think it's important. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because I'm busy preparing to move. I was up till 3 packing and all this other stuff. And I'm not officially separating at the moment, but so, right, bye. Oh, bad planning to have the controls right in front of you there. I will just, I'll kind of take portions of this to as you already know, successful walkable downtowns benefit from creating a critical mass for shopping and experiencing human interaction. Uses determine the character of a street as well as its walkability and level of street activation. Uses that are not open to the public can drastically affect these attributes. And as John had at that time recently noted, new constructions and renovations can lock up a use for the next 40 years. We tend to build something. Actually, I had obscured the name of this. I think this is just to give an example. It's not to pick on any particular businesses, but you have 5 businesses in that. I'm sorry, that one. There are 5 businesses there. Not one of those can you walk into, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. I think it's important that the Planning Commission consider creating a shopping district. One of my board members at a meeting, who's a downtown business owner and owns the property, said, we don't need a business district, we need a shopping district. you know, when you're driving down the road, whatever interstate highway, and you see something that says get off for the business district, it may say the business district, but you're not getting off to go to a accountant's office or doctor's office generally. You're getting off to shop, get something to eat. There are uses that are more complementary in terms of what create a viable downtown, an active downtown. So I think portions of Main Street and Central Avenue were clearly built for retail uses. They served that purpose well for close to 100 years. The large display windows are a testament to that use. Although this historic use was concentrated downtown at one time by infrastructure and transportation issues, these uses have sprawled along our arteries in recent decades. It made shopping depend on cars and reduced the viability of downtowns across the entire United States. So we're talking about the kind of businesses that say, welcome, please come in. And doesn't mean that businesses, you know, not good businesses, but the kind of business you're talking about is saying, you walked into my door, you just showed up, you're welcome, come on in. And those uses are, you know, pretty common. Stores, restaurants, and I'm going to elaborate on that, just brief list. Men's and women's clothing stores, jewelry, art galleries, game stores, drugstores and pharmacies, coffee shops, confectioner shops, chocolate and candy shops, pastry and bread baking, sandwich shops, eyewear with or without examination services, hair cutting and hair styling, food stores, restaurants, recorded music, musical instrument stores, alcohol, wine, beer sales, crafts, entertainment venues, movie houses, bars, bookstores, specialty retail, electronics, camera shops, florists, and so on. We could also include small manufacturing where things are sold right there at the shop. And they certainly can include retail services for like tailor shops, shoes, boots, footwear repair, household goods, furniture, hardware, paint stores, fragrance stores, small performance spaces, and appliance stores. And you can certainly go back and look at locations along Broadway and other places and say, those places used to be downtown. Concentrating retail uses to establish a critical mass of activity is a greater issue at street level than upper floors. And customers and employees can add to the foot traffic. And I want to repeat that thought that offices can be complementary uses if they're placed on the upper levels in order to concentrate on the retail and complementary uses on the first floor. I think I recall that the CBD zone says we don't do residential on the first floor. Second floor, great. First floor, no. And I would also say that there's some room, I think, to do it on the first floor, but I would say that you have prime frontage right up against the street, right where you should be engaging customers visually. But if you put some offices toward the back, if you go down a corridor and it's in back, but preserving the frontage for engagement with customers. I would again say that we need to encourage complementary uses that create a critical mass of activity. And I don't want to go into, again, too much detail. I think this requires a little bit of study. But I have listed 7 locations that I think should be at least considered as the heart of an overlay zone. I think it's subject to a little bit of study, but I think it's the place to start to look. And certainly most of Main Street, not all of Main Street, but a good portion of it. A good portion of Central Avenue as well. And I mean, this is part what we're doing in terms of encouraging large display windows, engagement, the elimination of frosted windows, the elimination of reflective windows. They're good to kind of straighten your hair out, but not so good for looking in and engaging both ways. from the inside to the outside. And I can tell you that Bismarck, for instance, has specifically wanted that engagement when they were looking at their planning, just to take a nearby example. I'm not going to be around to champion this, but I thought it was I know that this was also something that I was engaging with people from the Downtown Business and Professional Association, and I know, again, the comment that we should have a shopping zone came from one of those members. So I think that it's important that that zoning supports the idea of a concentration of activity. I would also add that anybody who's already there, I think you know your role well enough to know that anybody who's currently there is grandfathered in. You're not going to force anybody out. But to expand it further in the future, I think would be not thinking about how getting all those things together. We certainly know from experience that if somebody's walking down the street and they hit a curtain wall and there's no experience, they gotta stop walking. Again, people kind of ping pong down the street, kind of checking stores out. The more, the better. I think it takes time to get this. I think this whole issue developed over time. For a variety of reasons. I cover it a little better in the rest of the document here. But I hope you'll look at this as time goes on, and I think an overlay zone is a good way to address it, and it gives you flexibility going forward. I would just ask that you keep it on your agenda, and I thank you for that. I'm not here to talk about that plan, but I'd also give that a look. And Ellie's sitting here, she worked on it. I think it's very important that you continue to look at all these things and improve the quality of life here, and make it a better place to do business and just to live. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight.
Thank you. Very good information, too. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments for him? Mr. John?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would just say that I don't, my suspicion is here that no one would be happy to have missing teeth in the retail smile.
Oh, yeah, you read
downtown.
that part.
I just want to add a little bit of context with regard to this aspect was brought up during the comprehensive planning activities with the steering committee. And at the time, which was just earlier this year, 6 months ago, I would say at least upon its initial reveal, it was not exactly well received. So I do think quite a bit of continued dialogue is necessary to edify individuals on the benefits of having a retail-oriented portion of downtown that's just and just to continue to just educate regarding the matter. So plenty of communities do have certain areas that are strictly dedicated to retail, and this is where you see a lot of street activation, closures of streets. It's very pet oriented and it's highly successful. We do have some of that already, but having full retail along those helps breed that activity. So I think it's certainly something that as a planner, I'm an advocate of. I also understand the temperature of the community and I mean, Vice Chairman Bauman was there as well. I'm not sure if you attended that meeting specifically, but so I think it's certainly more discussion should occur regarding having an overlay district. As Jonathan and I have discussed as well, I really hope that that it does continue to occur. Just know that it was part of the discussion during the comprehensive plan creation. It was shot down at this time, but that doesn't mean that it can't be revisited, and it doesn't mean that it's not a great idea. It's absolutely a great idea. It just needs to be received by the community. Otherwise, it's not a great idea. It's hostile. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up with that, they did vote to keep the goal in the comprehensive plan for this, for the future, but they recommended it not be implemented right away. So, I agree with Mr. Van Dyke in that we need to start the dialogue and work towards adoption of this type of overlay district for the downtown.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, and I would just say that in general, there are a few businesses I think are destructive of people, drug dealing, that kind of thing. But I do think that in general, there's no bad business. The question is, do you want them right next to each other? There's animal farming. Do you want that right next to your perfume factory or whatever? I mean, and so we're just saying, let's try to put it together because it builds on itself. Again, the whole idea of critical mass, having those things together, that when they say, let's go shopping, let's go downtown. But if you have one here and one here, you reduce the walkability of the area, you reduce the attractiveness. They work cohesively together, they complement each other. And I think that zoning can help reinforce that idea.
One quick question, just out of curiosity, what was some of the hesitation, or what was the big fight against it, or why was they, just to put it in context, like kind of.
Chairman Offerdahl, it seemed I think there's a misunderstanding on non-conforming uses. I think this is my personal perception at this point. I believe it was perceived as hostile towards certain businesses since they weren't retail, that they were inherently viewed as negative to that particular area. And of course, that is absolutely not the case. Non-conforming uses, once ceased for a year or more, then aren't able to then reopen with that existing use. So then you would require something that's been vacant, storefront that's been vacant for 1 year or more, to open as a retail-oriented establishment. So it's really not, it would just naturally, over time, there would be attrition of non-retail businesses, and the expectation is that new businesses that open within this particular area would be retail-oriented. So that's how it gets affected. But I think without going into a lengthy dialogue to explain some of the how non-conforming works and some of the other benefits associated with having retail corridors, it just was not well received. But I think that was largely based on misunderstanding. So I think once the concept would be potentially explained in more detail, I think you would see a lot more buy-in, potentially.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. So I don't believe that there's a motion or anything needed on this. This is just an informational piece, if I remember. Okay. Anybody else have any other business tonight? Okay. Well, seeing none, then we will go to agenda item number 9, which is adjournment. Thank you.
Best of luck to you. You did your 5 years. No gray